Bertong Kunat!
Daryong Dagol!
Ano tong balitang pinagkakalat mo dito sa baluarte ko, ha?
Anong balita?
Huwag ka na magmaang-maangan pa!
Ayun ba? Ha? Hindi ba totoo naman? Nasag ang lunas sa COVID. Alam mo ba kung nasa naman ka pa yun? Nasa naga talaga yun. At higit sa lahat, fake news talaga yung ads sa Revolution.
Ungas ka ba? Ano ba pinagsasabi mo? Saan mo pinagkukuha yan?
Huh, syempre, nag-research ako, no? Sa Tuktuk University. Palibasa ko kasi ugot ka na at laos, kaya hindi mo alam yun. Ano, ha?
Lord naman! Magpaulan ka naman ng katalinuhan!
Reliable source of information, sari-saring content na isinulat ng mga eksperto, mga librong di kalidad na abot hanggang sa doomsday, tumawag ka lang sa akin. By the way, hindi ako si Lord. Ako si Vibal.
O pre, tingnan mo to. Di ba sabi ko sa'yo totoong EDSA Revolution?
Oo nga, no? O tapos ito, wala pala talaga sa Naga ang bulkang Mayon.
Sabi ko sa'yo eh.
Good day, Kavibal, and welcome to our YouTube Live. For the discussion today, the topic will be on Explores Beyond Words, Developing Critical Reading Skills Among Learners. Before we begin, please take note of the following reminders. Make sure you're registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com or eturo.org to generate your proof of attendance. Share the video using hashtag #LearnYourself as our official hashtag to all our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal. And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today. Ms. Joy Empire Pan is a graduate of Bachelor in English Education with a certificate in teaching senior high school from Philippine Normal University, Manila. She is also pursuing her Master of Arts in English Language Education at the same university. She has previously handled junior and senior high school subjects, specifically research electives. Currently, she is an English teacher in the junior high school unit of University of Santo Tomas. Her research interests include technology-based language teaching, second language reading, and research instruction. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Teen Joy Empire Pan.
Once again, this session is on exploring texts beyond words, developing critical reading skills among learners. By the end of this session, we hope to apply important facets of critical reading in our classes. We aim to further students' understanding of texts beyond their literal sense and unearth aspects that are highly relevant and significant in the present time. To begin, let us establish that reading is an active process, because as a language skill, it is often stigmatized as passive, which only involves decoding the material to achieve a certain level of comprehension. However, the current understanding of reading sees it as an active skill that involves critical interpretation and reflective inquiry. Such a concept would be significant in the succeeding discussion. Now, we move to the focus of this session. What is critical reading? I'm not sure if this is the first time you have heard of the term critical reading, but I would like to assume that the terms critical and reading as a skill are not new to you anymore. So let's define critical reading first. According to Canilao in 2007, critical reading is the science of understanding, interpreting, analyzing, and evaluating texts effectively. As specified, there are various skills and processes that enable a reader or our students to read critically. Processes, models, questions, and even theories help and enhance clarity and comprehension once applied. According to Richards and Smith in 2010, critical reading sees the reader as an active part of the process, since his or her reaction is crucial in understanding the text. Let us bear in our minds the role of the readers themselves in the critical reading process. As mentioned, they are of an active part of the process. Personal values, standards, attitudes, or beliefs, our personality, or even our approach to personal approaches to certain situations might be helpful in understanding a particular text. And they actually go beyond, okay, on what is presented in the text. Also, we say context is also significant. In here, I would like to emphasize, as mentioned in the definition, that there are various layers and dimensions of language that can be explored. But a simple literal reading may not be able to reveal those. To give us a clearer distinction between reading and critical reading, let us look at this table. By idea, here are the differences. When it comes to purpose, most reading activities only aim to get at least a basic grasp of the text, while critical reading aims to form judgments about how the text works. Activities in reading involve absorbing and understanding. On the other hand, critical reading is more focused on analysis, interpretation, and evaluation. We can associate this one with higher order thinking skills. Then, as mentioned earlier nga po, since the purpose of reading is just for details, its focus is on what the text says rather than what it does and means in certain situations and circumstances. Some questions that might be asked during reading activities would be, what is the text saying? What information can be obtained from it? Well, if it's situated in a critical reading system or scheme, it would be, how does the text work? How is it argued? What are the choices made? Say, for example, if it's a literary text, what were the choices of the characters? Are there some patterns, cause and effect patterns that might be discovered or revealed in the text? What kind of reasoning and evidence are used by the author? So you see here, okay, we are not only limited with the information, the basic information provided in the text when it comes to critical reading. Now, when it comes to responses after the reading activity, most of the time we are only, or the students are only tasked to restate or summarize what they have read, highlighting the information again from the text. But when it comes to critical reading, we allow our learners to respond by providing reasoned insights, interpretations, and even evaluations of assumptions presented by the author. So you might be thinking, no, why is there a need to teach critical reading skills? So let us contextualize it further, situate it in our current setup or current time. Today's learners belong to Generation Z. Siguro our age, as teachers might be a little, we are a little older from this generation. That's why there is a need to develop critical literacy among them, because we need to prepare them in solving real world problems in and out of the school. So it's not only with questions, problems presented in class that should be answered by our students, but they must be ready in addressing issues, problems, concerns outside the class or outside the classroom. According to Sipol in 1970, as cited in Fernandez and Padilla in 2020, learning how to read critically must begin early. Okay, actually, the Department of Education and its curriculum guide in English, I'm not quite sure in the other guides for other subjects, but in English, there is an inclusion of content and competencies that are geared towards critical reading and other related skills to it. Okay? So, students need reading skills to successfully accomplish educational goals and expectations which are required for them in the classroom settings. Also, as affirmed here in McDaniel in 2004, developing critical viewpoints towards texts helps student readers transfer their skills to a larger society, and also helping them to make intelligent decisions in the future. So we say critical reading might be, in simple terms, is basically a reading process that involves critical thinking. Recent literature reviews actually look into reading as not just extracting information, but a process of connecting the text with the reader's knowledge that he or she brings in. As mentioned earlier po, di ba? Our readers have an active role in the process. That's why their knowledge, their prior knowledge, is highly significant in the critical reading process. Thus, these are the skills needed to be developed and applied when reading a text. First would be interpreting. When we say interpretation or giving interpretation, we are using our knowledge in answering what an author intends in a text. Second would be inferring. Using prior knowledge, we activate students' prior knowledge and the information stated in the text to draw conclusions. Third would be drawing conclusions, figuring out much more than what the author says directly, and this is usually done after reading the entire text. Fourth would be looking at separate ideas and looking at separate ideas and see how they connect with each other to support the main idea of the text. Fifth would be distinguishing facts from opinions. So as we all know, facts are ideas that are already proven, while opinions are beliefs and judgments. When presented with such statements, our students may use their prior knowledge to distinguish facts from opinions. Next would be evaluating, forming an opinion or making a judgment about something being read. 7 would be synthesizing, combining ideas to come up with something new, such as new understanding or a new way of presenting information. And lastly would be predicting, making intelligent guesses what will happen next in a text, for example, a story. So, we need to know how would we teach the critical reading skills mentioned earlier. Let us put this one in context again. It is not easy for our young readers to learn to interpret author's intended meaning. Kapag po pinagbasa natin sila, it would take time for them to identify what the author meant in a particular story, for example. And it would also take time for them to respond to the signals given in the text. Okay, kahit na deliberately, explicitly na natin sinasabi, binabanggit yung details in the text, some students still have difficulty in identifying or analyzing those clues. In this respect, teachers, us teachers, have an indispensable role in guiding our learners to approach reading texts critically. Okay, so later you will see some approaches, some strategies on how will we incorporate critical reading skills or how will we use critical reading in our classes. And it's not just about approaching the texts critically, but also to guide them, okay, in the realization and evaluation of a possible match or mismatch between their own beliefs, knowledge, and those of the authors of texts. So here are some of the approaches to task selection and task design. First would be encourage students to be alert to the culture-specific content of texts and tasks. When they are reading, we can give them a heads up. Okay, so class, our reading text would be highly cultural in nature. Okay, so we can provide those previewing things or previewing clues to them. Okay, so that they can approach the text in a particular lens or perspective so that they are aware of what to expect in the text. Next would be encourage students to be more aware of their own strategies and roles as readers. We can say that our learners, they are different from each other. They are very unique from each other. They have their own strategies as readers. They have their own roles as readers. They bring in to the reading activity or the reading task different perspectives because they belong to different upbringing, say for example. So we must tell them or we must encourage them to be more aware of how they are as readers, how they approach readers as themselves. Third would be offer learners strategies that allow them to critique the discourses within texts. It depends on how that particular text was approached in the classroom or what particular instruction you are giving as a teacher. So, in summary, for this approaches to task selection and task design, so again, we need to remember, I would like to highlight this one. One of the critical approaches to text selection is selecting texts which could pose problems for students to solve. Okay? It all boils down to the idea of the selection of texts. Okay? We must be very careful in identifying or, say, for example, in selecting texts. Because, again, our aim should be developing their critical reading skills. We must select texts that could pose problems for students to solve. We can also explore texts which are of literature basis. Okay, literary texts. We have various literary pieces that we can use in our classes. Texts which have cross-cultural material. Okay, it might be explicit or implicit. And texts which could give alternative discourses to students. Students should also be aware of their own learning strategies and their social role as readers. Okay, now we have here some questions for critical reading. We can give this to our students prior a reading task, okay? Because we must bear in our minds, okay? Critical reading includes the capability to question assumptions, identify logic beneath the sentences, and reveal implicit values inherent in the author's line of thought. So you will see here in the questions, okay? Allow me to read them. First, why am I reading this? What are the authors trying to do in writing this? what are the authors saying that is relevant to what I want to find out? How convincing is what the authors are saying? In conclusion, what use can I make of this? If we will look into the questions here, they are somewhat subjective in a way because it's only asking for the perspective of our learners, of our students. But again, our idea here is that our learners is an active reader in the process. Kaya po ganyan. Why am I reading this? And there's some sort of reflection. Okay? In conclusion, what use can I make of this particular reading that I did? Okay? Critical reading, you might be thinking, puro questions lang. Questioning facts, okay? Questioning the information, ideas presented in the text. But actually, critical reading is not entirely about questioning facts, information presented in the text. But it is searching for evidence that supports a claim. Okay? Later, I'll be providing you again, or I will be providing you some strategies for such critical reading. Okay? Again, it is searching for evidence that supports a claim, weighing the importance of possible interpretations, and questioning whether the assumptions, arguments presented in a text are convincing enough to be applied to other texts. So here are some critical reading strategies and activities that we can apply or employ in our classes. Okay, the first one would be previewing. Okay, it's learning about the text before really reading it. I think most of us, if there are some English teachers, Filipino teachers there, we always ask our students, what do they think of the title of, say, for example, a story? Okay, what do they think the story will be about based on its title? Actually, it's one way of activating critical reading skills. Okay, you are giving them the opportunity to give their intelligent guesses regarding what the text would be about. Okay, so we can ask students to preview the title if it's some literary pieces. If it's an academic text, we can ask them to read the abstract, also the headings and subheadings if there are, and skim reading even the introduction and conclusion. But the idea here is that we must ask them to share their impressions to the class. It's not only developing their critical reading, but also allowing them to voice out their impressions, okay? Share their ideas and thoughts to their classmates. Not only, again, developing their critical reading skills, but also giving them the opportunity to participate more actively and be engaged in the discussion. Second would be contextualizing, placing a text in its historical, biographical, and cultural contexts. As I mentioned, we must not, we should give our students this particular idea that we are approaching texts in not only one lens or perspective. Texts, especially literary text or even fiction or non-fiction pieces, are actually influenced by history, biography of the author, and even the culture where the author came from. Okay? So as teachers, we could set guiding questions that would ask our students to place the text in these contexts: historical, biographical, and cultural. Then, there is really a need to contextualize, to recognize also the differences between the present time, the present values and attitudes of our learners, and those that are presented in the text. Third, questioning, asking questions about the content. this could be like one of the most important strategy that I would like you to remember. Encourage our learners to ask questions. Let's let's make it a habit that we allow them to ask questions in our classes, especially during reading activities. And also, us teachers, we should ask questions that would be helping our students understand the text and respond to it more fully. Then, we have here reflecting, examining personal responses. This is might be, somewhat related to the third strategy, which is questioning, because most of us, we employ the use of reflection questions. After a particular reading activity or after discussing a text, we ask 4 questions that would ask for their personal responses. Okay? We need to allow our readers to reflect so that, again, they could examine their own attitudes, beliefs, and positions on current issues. We might want to situate the text in a different time. Say, for example, if it is published in 1950s, so it's, years back na. And we are currently living in 2022. We might want to ask our students to reflect what could have been, okay, what could have been the changes in terms of the assumptions presented by the author because it was written years back, and how would it be different now? So again, we could also ask our students to reflect on the text because we want them to examine their personal attitudes, beliefs, and positions on certain issues. Then we have, for the 5th one, we have here outlining and summarizing, identifying main ideas and restating them in their own words. We can do this one, okay, after they have read the text, they could write an outline or summary, but see to it that they will write it using their own words. Okay? Because understanding, okay, and processing, analyzing, interpreting would be present in the outline or summary that they will be providing. As teachers, we can provide templates for these. 6 would be evaluating, testing the logic of a text, as well as its credibility and emotional impact. Say, for example, if our text is more on the argumentative and persuasive sides, we can ask them to identify the claims presented by the author and what were the support used to back up those claims. Then proceed to the discussion whether the argument presented by the author is well made or well reasoned. And lastly, we can do comparison and contrast, exploring likeness and differences between texts. We can choose 2 texts, okay? And we will allow our learners, our students, to compare and contrast, say, for example, 2 different authors. Two similar stories that would have different plots and even arguments. Okay? So again, we can explore these critical reading strategies and activities. Then let us situate it in the 3 phases of reading: pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading. So pre-reading activities in this phase, we can use previewing. Okay? We can ask them for their impressions about the title, or we can also do questioning here as a strategy. Students could come up with their own questions, even statements or hypotheses, rather than mostly us giving the questions that will dictate the way they would read the text. Okay? Aside from providing pre-reading questions, our students could be more active in the process because they can raise further questions in the course of the reading. Okay, this is different from the usual reading task where the aim is solely for students to find answers. So again, we can do in the pre-reading part, previewing and questioning. So for while reading activities, in this phase, we could offer students alternative readings of the text. They should be encouraged to think critically and to look at the different discourses which they can be found in text, but there is more than one. Okay, while reading, okay, we can ask the students to evaluate, okay, do the evaluating strategy. As mentioned, they will look into the arguments presented in the text, some decisions by the characters, and how would it be different in a way after the entire story or entire text. Okay? We can also be creative, okay, in devising reading tasks that would offer our students to read the text in many ways. The use of literary texts in a reading class is one example of helping the students to come out with different discourses. Then, for post-reading activities, in this phase, pwede tayo mag-reflecting, okay? And we could also do comparison and contrast. We could carry out activities that will help our students to think more critically and respond critically to the text. Okay, as I mentioned, we can do comparison and contrast. We could ask our students to identify the different features of the two texts. Okay, again, we must be creative in devising activities. So again, for pre-reading, we can do previewing and questioning. While reading, the students could incorporate evaluating. For post-reading, we can do reflecting, and also we could have comparison and contrast, or comparing and contrasting. So that's how we could incorporate critical reading strategies, aiming to develop the critical reading skills provided earlier. So, what would be the significance of critical reading skills today? You might be thinking, no, ma'am, we're doing this one naman in some cases. But I would like to highlight that we are in the information age, okay? Our students are dealing with various sources of information, and it's very important, and it's actually an imperative for them to be critical readers. Okay? Reading critically is undeniably an important skill that needs to be implemented in our classes. Hindi lang po sa English classes, wherein we are reading literary texts, argumentative texts, but also in other subjects. Okay, they could apply the reading skills that they already have in analyzing texts, interpreting texts, providing their evaluations, and their analysis. Okay? Again, hindi lang naman po sa pagbabasa ng mga literary texts, ng mga story, maa-apply ang critical reading skills. Kahit sa the way they approach certain texts that are informational, that would require them to dissect if the information is factual or not, or if it's merely fabricated or falsified. Okay? Again, it needs to be implemented in our classes because of numerous benefits. Our students can question ideas. Okay? Ideas presented to them and their own ideas as well. Also, we can, it is a chance for them to provide various interpretations. Our learners are unique. They do have various perspectives about certain matters, and it's high time, it's very important, crucial time to allow them to provide their own interpretations. And they can only provide such interpretation if they know how to read and think critically. Okay? Also, it critical reading skills would help them examine position of the writers, okay, and evaluate texts from many aspects. And as teachers, we have a pivotal role in fostering critical reading practices in our classes. By mastering critical reading skills, for instance, our students will be able to weigh public issues and make intelligent choices, as mentioned nga po earlier. We are preparing our students to make intelligent choices and decisions in the future. We are using our platform inside our classes to enable them to be more active, okay? Not just in terms of reading, in analyzing texts, in interpreting texts, but also it would be important in their in real life situations. So, I would like to reiterate that critical reading is an active and purposeful process. It might be a little bit more complex than simple reading because it would require our readers to read the lines, between lines, and beyond lines. But with the help of the reading strategies and activities that we could use in our classes, we can help our students to be more active and purposeful in their reading activities. It's very important. I would like to say that this is the time for our students to be more critical, not just in speaking, listening, reading, but also in their thinking. And one way for our students to become critical thinkers is that they begin as critical readers. Again po, critical reading is an active and purposeful process. And I think that marks the end of my sharing. I hope that you will be able to apply critical reading to your classes. Again po, you can make use of the critical reading strategies and activities in your classes. And again, thank you and good afternoon.
There we have it. In behalf of Vibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for today for this eye-opening and insightful learning session. It is an honor to have you with us. And to all our Kavibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. Don't forget to register to get your e-certificate of participation. The link is in the caption of this webinar. We encourage you also to subscribe and watch on our official Vibal Facebook and YouTube channel. Muli, maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat.